Number 15, Swinging the Lead, 1976, the Lower Chesapeake, fog on the water and no depth sounder aboard. On the shelf above the chart table, there is a brass sextant in a wooden box. The man in the bow is holding 11 pounds of lead on a marked line. The marks are not numbers. You read them with your fingers. In the dark, leather at 2 fathoms and 3, white calico at 5, red bunting at 7. 2 fathoms is 12 feet, and the call for it is by the Mark Twain. A young Mississippi pilot named Samuel Clemens liked it enough to take it for a pen name. Then there is the part almost nobody remembers. The base of the lead is hollow, and you press tallow into the hollow before you throw it. That is arming the lead. It comes up with sand stuck to it, or shell, or black mud, and the chart says what the bottom is made of in every patch of that river. So a man with a rope and a lump of grease is not getting depth. He is getting position. That still gets me. No power, nothing to calibrate. It needs a line that does not come apart in your hands. And the next is how you kept it that way. 14. Whipping and splicing, 1979. Any chandlery on the East Coast, 3-strand nylon, sold off a spool by the foot. It frays the moment you cut it, so you finish the end yourself. Palm, needle, wax twine. A sailor's whipping takes 90 seconds and lasts 20 years. The eye splice is the real skill. 3 tucks against the lay, taper it, roll it under your foot. A knot gives you back about half the strength of the line. A splice gives back almost all of it. A lot of you can still do this in the dark. Put it in a comment, what line you learned on, and who taught you. Half of what ends up in these lists comes out of replies like that. Splices hold. The instrument sitting above them lied to you every day, on purpose, and number 13 is what you did about it. 13. Swinging the compass. Every boat leaving a yard in 1974 has a small card taped beside the binnacle. Handwritten, 8 headings down one side, a correction in degrees down the other. The compass is honest about magnetic north. It is not honest about your boat. The engine block, the cast iron ballast, the speaker magnets, all of it pulls the card, and it pulls a different amount on every heading. So you swing her, run a known transit, or take bearings on a steeple 4 miles off on 8 headings, and write down what she lies to you by each time. Then the arithmetic. True, variation, magnetic, deviation, compass. Every kid learned the sentence for it. True virgins make dull company. A compass that lies by a known amount is a safe compass. That little card is the most honest object on the boat. It could not tell you one thing though. Number 12 could. 12. Reading a barometer. An aneroid barometer on the bulkhead, tapped with a knuckle every morning. There is a second brass needle on the glass, and you set it on top of the reading and leave it there, because the number does not matter. The change matters. Steady, and tomorrow looks like today. Falling 3 millibars in 3 hours, and something is coming that you want to be tied up for. And there is a line every one of these men could recite. Long foretold, long last. Short notice, soon past. A slow fall means a long blow. A fast one means a hard blow that clears. A forecast is written for 100 miles of coast. The barometer is written for the exact patch of water you are floating on. It is also one of 3 instruments still bolted into a Navy training bridge. Number 1 is the third. If you ever kept a log with the reading written down at 8 in the morning, at noon, and at 8 at night, subscribe. This channel is being built for the men who did it that way, and half of what goes into these lists starts as one of your comments. The barometer told you a storm was coming. Number 11 is how you told somebody else, and it has a date of death and a last sentence. Number 11, standing a radio watch, 500 kilohertz. For most of the 20th century, that is the distress frequency of the whole world, and twice an hour, the whole world shuts up. 3 minutes past the hour, 3 minutes past the half hour. Every commercial radio room on every ocean goes silent, so 1 weak signal from one sinking ship can be heard. They call it the silent period. 2,182 kilohertz does the same for voice, and it is all worked by hand. An operator copying Morse at 25 words a minute onto a pad with a mug going cold beside him. By the mid-90s, the rooms are already emptying, and the watch is not worth keeping. 1 minute past midnight, Zulu, on the 1st of April, 1995, Station November, Mike November, at Chesapeake, Virginia, sends the last American Morse broadcast, by hand, on 4 frequencies at once. It begins, now closing down continuous watch. It ends, fair winds and following seas, with 73s from all of us. 73 is telegraph shorthand for best wishes. That is the part that still gets me. The last thing he does with that frequency is be polite to men he never met. The gray box that replaced it lasted 15 years longer, and number 10 is the skill that died with it. Number 10, reading Loran lines off a paper chart. 1982, a Loran-C receiver screwed to the shelf over the bunk. It does not give you a position. It gives you 4 figures, twice, time differences, how much later one shore station's pulse arrives than another's. You take those numbers to the chart, where 2 families of curved purple lines are printed. Find one, find the other, and you are standing where they cross. Now the part the fishermen understood best. Loran was never accurate in absolute terms, but it was ferociously repeatable. Write the numbers down over a wreck, and you could come back years later and be within a boat length, even if the true position was a quarter mile out. So they never wrote coordinates. They wrote TDs in pencil, in notebooks, left to sons. On the 8th of February 2010, at 3 in the afternoon, the signal is switched off. Caribou, Maine, transmits last. 67 years, done. Which means a lot of the best bottom in New England is written down in numbers that point at nothing. Number 9 is the 15-minute job that decides whether you get home to read them. Number 9, bleeding a diesel, a Ford Lehman 120, a Perkins 4236. Run one of those tanks dry once and she will not start again, because a diesel will not pump air. Crack the bleed screw on the primary filter and work the lift pump lever until what comes out has no bubbles. Same at the secondary. Then the step that separates people. Throttle wide open, loosen the injector nuts half a turn, crank her until fuel weeps out at each one, nip them up one at a time. She fires on the ones you have done and shakes herself sideways while you finish. 2 wrenches and a rag. That is the whole argument for an old boat in one job. The outboard on the transom was simpler still, and number 8 is why it ran with no battery at all. 8. Points, condenser, and magneto, 1971, a 20-horse 2-stroke, pull cord, no starter, no battery. The flywheel has magnets in it and makes its own spark. Under it sit the points, 2 contacts set with a feeler gauge and cleaned up with the striking edge off a matchbook. Behind them is the condenser, which costs about the same as lunch and fails without warning. She runs rough, dies hot, starts again once she cools, and does that all day until you change it. An engine that makes its own spark and needs no battery is a better idea than most things sold since. When she did not run, nobody called anybody. Number 7 is what they did instead, with 1 oar. 7. Sculling. Look at the transom of any yard dinghy on the Maine coast in the 70s, and you find a notch cut in it, or a bronze crutch bolted there. 1 oar goes through it, and the blade never leaves the water. You twist your wrist at the end of each stroke so it always bites, and the figure of 8 pushes her along at a walking pace. 1 hand, standing up, facing forward. It looks like a party trick. It is the only way to move a boat with 1 oar and no row lock. Number 6 moves 15 tons off the mud, and it is the last one you can practice this weekend, before the 3 the Navy takes seriously. 6. Kedging off. Buzzards Bay. A falling tide. A full keel, soft bottom coming up at 4 knots. You have 20 minutes. Hang the anchor off the stern of the dinghy, not in the bottom of her, and row it out into deep water while somebody pays out rowed. Take the rowed back to the sheet winch, not the bow, and take a strain. Then you cheat. Swing the boom out with the mainsail up and put 2 people on the end of it. A few degrees of heel on a full keel is inches of draft you did not have. Grind. Wait. Grind again. A tow costs real money now, and that anchor is sitting on the bow doing nothing. Number 5 tells you which way the water is going, and it fits on a matchbook. Number 5. The rule of twelfths. 6 hours from low water to high, near enough, and the tide does not come in evenly. The old rule splits the range like this: first hour, 1/12, second, 2, third, 3, fourth, 3, fifth, 2, sixth, 1. Half the range moves in the middle 2 hours. 9 feet of range in Maine means 4.5 feet arriving in 120 minutes. It is why you take the ground on a rising tide on purpose and never on a falling one. Water you can predict, cloth you cannot, and number 4 kept a boat moving when the cloth let go. Number 4. Palm and needle. Every boat carries a ditty bag, and everything in it is older than the boat. A leather sailmaker's palm worn to one man's hand, 3 triangular needles, beeswax, waxed twine. A tier is not sewn shut edge to edge. You lay the sides together and work a herringbone stitch across the gap, so the pull spreads over the whole repair instead of loading one line of holes. The patch goes on with its weave lined up, or it makes a hard spot that tears again beside it. A sail with an honest hand patch in it has been somewhere. I would rather look at that than a new one. Number 3 is what you did when moving was the wrong idea altogether. 3. Heaving to. Blowing hard for 9 hours, the crew finished, steering no longer safe. So you stop. Not with an engine and not with a sea anchor. You tack her without touching the headsail sheet. The jib comes across and sits aback, pinned on the wrong side. The helm goes down and gets lashed. Now she argues with herself. The backed jib pushes the bow off. The rudder pushes it up, and the two cancel out. She lies 50 or 60 degrees off the wind, fore-reaching slowly, sliding sideways. That slide is the trick. It leaves a slick of flattened water upwind, and the seas walking down on you hit it and break early. Below, it goes from unbearable to merely loud. You eat, you sleep. This is the one I would want back first, and I will be straight about the limit. She does it best with a long keel and an attached rudder. A fin and spade will lie there, but not politely. Number 2 is what you did with the paper on the table while you waited, and in January of last year, it officially ran out. Number 2, dead reckoning. Parallel rules, dividers, a soft pencil, and a rubber, because you will draw on that chart and rub it out 40 times. Every hour, an entry in the deck log, course, speed, time. Then you walk the rules over from the compass rose, step the distance off with the dividers, and mark a cross with the time beside it. That cross is not where you are. It is where you should be. The difference is the sea working on you, and naming it is the job. Then you check it, and the check every navigator loved needs no chart. Take a bearing on a point at 45 degrees off the bow. Hold your course until that bearing doubles to 90, and however far you have run is how far off that point you are. NOAA spent 5 years retiring the traditional paper chart, and by January of 2025, the last of 1,007 of them was canceled. A plot is a plan. A screen is a report on where you already are. Which one you were raised on shows up the night the screen goes dark. Number 1 tells you where you actually are, and it is the one they stopped teaching, then had to go back for. 1. Celestial navigation. The brass sextant from the top of this video, still in its box. Around midday, you follow the sun up, bringing it down to the horizon again and again. Higher, higher, then it stops. That stop is local apparent noon, 90 minus the angle, then the declination out of the almanac, and you have your latitude. No clock, no radio, no permission from anybody. At twilight, 3 stars, 3 lines on the plotting sheet, and the little triangle they make, the cocked hat, is you in the middle of an ocean, from a mirror and some arithmetic. Now, the 2 dates. In 1998, the United States Naval Academy stopped teaching celestial navigation to midshipmen. Satellites did it faster, and the hours were needed elsewhere. It was the reasonable call at the time. On the 2nd of May, 2000, the deliberate error in the civilian GPS signal was switched off, and accuracy jumped from about 100 meters to about 20. That is the year the sextant went into the box on a lot of American boats. Then in 2015, the Academy put it back in. Not for tradition. A satellite signal is a weak thing arriving from 12,000 miles away, and it can be jammed, spoofed, or simply lost. My own money goes on this one, and not because the sky is romantic. It is the only position on this list that cannot be switched off from a building on shore. 15 skills, and not one needs a battery. Everyone was built so a man alone could work out where he was and what was coming for him. The boats changed. The water did not. These came off boats that took the sea seriously. The other half of that story is the boat that took the sea and made it fun, a California catamaran that put families on beaches all over America, then lost those beaches completely. The rise and fall of Hobie Cat is on the screen right now. Click it, and I will see you in there.